Hi guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel so blessed and truly so lucky to be a professional Vedic astrologer. So today I have a really interesting topic to cover with you guys, and we are going to go into the energy of the natal Mercury retrograde in the chart. So I did a video prior on analyzing retrograde planets and how essentially the houses that a retrograde planet rules is going to bring a lot of that retrograde energy to those houses, right? So if Mercury rules the 7th house, the 7th ruler is retrograde, that's a big deal, right? It means that for that person, they get this retrograde energy in their 7th house. If Mars rules the 5th house and the 5th ruler is Mars and it's retrograde, they get a lot of retrograde energy for the ruler of that house, right? But today I really want to delve into the pinpointed topic of the natal Mercury retrograde. And for this video, I am speaking all from personal experience. Like, this is a placement I have. I know it very well. I've had it my whole life, so I have a lot of experience with the natal Mercury retrograde. And I do find I have a lot of clients that come to me that happen to have Mercury retrograde in their charts as well too. So yeah, I think it's a really important aspect of your chart to understand. I'm going to speak mostly just from personal experience more than anything else. And we are going to unravel what the energy of natal Mercury retrograde is going to manifest as in the natal chart. And I do feel like this is a pretty popular placement in the sense that I see a lot of charts with Mercury retrograde. I feel like a lot of people comment, like, what is the meaning of Mercury retrograde? So yeah, it's a pretty common placement, astrologically speaking. Okay, so let us start out with what is the energy of Mercury and what does this indicate in astrology? So Mercury is the karaka, or the indicator of the mind, it's intellect, it is travel, it's communication, it's speech, it's expression, it's also the siblings in Vedic astrology as well too. Mercury can also connect to business, technology, themes of that, right? So when someone has a natal Mercury retrograde, it means that those themes take on a retrograde sort of energy about them, right? Something's a little bit later to bloom, something is a little bit more unique, something is different. It comes to that person a bit later on in life as well too, right? And so I'm going to discuss like the general sort of energy of it, and then I'll go into my personal experiences having natal Mercury retrograde and what I have experienced. But yeah, it really just shows that the energies of Mercury, something's just different about it, right? It's not so traditional as maybe other people's Mercury would manifest in their chart, okay? So to me, Mercury retrograde, the main thing that I see with myself and clients is it takes us longer to gather our thoughts and be able to express it in the right way. Like, this is oh my God, this is such a common thing I see. And whenever I tell this to clients, they're like, oh, that's what that is. You know, they're always like really validated by that notion of Mercury retrograde. So because Mercury is the mind, it's the mental, it's the intellect, it's the thoughts, it's the speech, it's the expression. When it's retrograde, it can take us longer to get those out in the right way. It's not so quick. It's a little bit more introspective. It's more internal. It takes us longer to feel ready to express our thoughts in the right way. And what I find a lot in my own life with Mercury retrograde is like growing up in school, because Mercury also connects to schooling and education, I would always like have to think a lot about what I was going to say before I said it. I'd be like, wait, is it like this or should I say it like this? It's very internal by nature. So a natal Mercury retrograde will show that we just need longer to process our thoughts, to process what we're trying to express, because if we rush it and if we try to say something too quickly or put something out there too quickly, usually it doesn't really come out right. And I tell this a lot to clients as well too. And I had a client recently where I was explaining this to her and she's like, that happens to me all the time. She's like, I always try to say something and it doesn't quite translate the way I wanted it to come out. And I'm like, girl, I know. I have the Mercury retrograde too. So it's really important for those with natal Mercury retrograde to try to like gather your thoughts before you just spit it out and spew it out. Like it's really important to take some time to reflect and sit with what you want to express. So for example, when I do YouTube videos or I do, TikToks or anything I'm doing where I'm speaking a lot and I have to use my voice, it goes a lot better when I like sit and think about what I'm trying to express first, or if I like write about it, or if I journal about it, then it comes out a lot better than if I'm just like talking off the handle, because when I do that, I tend to ramble, things don't always come out right. And then I always look back and I'm like, wait, I should have said this, or I should have added this, or I forgot about this, right? So the Mercury retrograde energy, it's really beneficial for us and useful for us with that placement to really sit and reflect before we start speaking or communicating or expressing, right? Like it just takes us a little bit longer to properly gather what we want to say. And what I find a lot with natal Mercury retrograde is there can be some like issues or disconnection in early schooling or early education. So maybe there's an experience of like not being able to grasp certain concepts, or maybe a dissatisfaction within traditional schooling, or wanting to go your own path in schooling and education. This is a really major theme I see with natal Mercury retrograde. Is there something kind of unconventional or a little bit different about the path of education, right? So like for me, when I was growing up, I was so bad at math. I could like never grasp like certain concepts. And it was just like really not my thing. And I always loved like certain subjects in school, but I always said I was like traditional school was never my thing. Like I always wanted to just like do my own thing. I never really wanted to be in school growing up. And I really liked like unconventional learning. Like I loved learning about astrology. Oh my God, I could study astrology all day. I still do study it all day because I have to. But I just love those sort of studies. I love studying about like things that I'm interested in. But when it comes to traditional schooling, growing up, I didn't really connect much with normal education. I always thought like the education system was kind of out of whack. Like something always felt off to me where I was like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like this is how education should be. So that's also Mercury, right? Mercury is the karaka of education and school and learning. And so that retrograde energy can make it more difficult for those with Mercury retrograde to be in traditional schooling, to like sit all day and learn about these boring topics. They can be extremely interested in learning, but interested in more like non-traditional or unconventional subjects to some degree. So again, I have natal Mercury retrograde. When it comes to learning things about like math or science, right over my head. I would never pay attention to any of that. But when it comes to learning about like astrology or numerology or things that I'm genuinely interested in, I could study all day. I could read a million books about it. I can be very dedicated to my studies. But when it comes to anything that's more like traditional, I just don't find it interesting. It doesn't really work with like my mind because my Mercury is so retrograde, right? Like it takes on this very like non-linear, non-traditional sort of energy about it. Okay. So it's really interesting because I've felt that experience my whole life. I went to many different schools when I was younger. I dropped out of art school at one point because I was just like, I don't really agree with this. I don't know. Something feels off about this like traditional education path. So yeah, it's just like there can be some strange, interesting experiences with schooling and education with natal Mercury retrograde, as well too. There can be like breaks in education. They can want to learn something different. There can be a desire to learn about like non-conventional sort of topics, themes like that, right? So the mind processes information in a different way. It can process it more slowly. It can need more time to grasp certain concepts. And there can absolutely be some like breaks or issues in schooling and education, or there can be just like this huge desire to study something that's a little bit non-traditional or unconventional as well too. Okay, so these are some major themes I've seen in my life and many of my clients' life experience as well too. Of course, we have to analyze the whole chart. If someone has a super strong Mercury and it's aspected by a bunch of benefics, and their houses of school and education are really strong, then we're not just going to assume like, oh, someone has a Mercury retrograde, these things are going to happen. I'm speaking in a general sense from what I see, let's say 70 to 80% of the time in charts with natal Mercury retrograde and through my own experience as well too. Okay, so another major theme I see with Mercury retrograde is a need to revise and review things over and over again, and that can be really important for someone with a natal Mercury retrograde. So let's say someone has natal Mercury retrograde and they write a book or they write an essay or they write something, there can be a need to really go back and really revise and review and double check and edit and just make sure everything is right, because with natal Mercury retrograde, there can be a need to do something more than once. You'll see that a lot with retrograde planets is there's a theme in that person's life of doing it more than once, right? So it can be like, oh, I wrote this book once, now I want to go back and perfect it or fix it or edit it or do it again and do it better. So there can be a lot of energy of reviewing, revising, editing when it comes to Mercury retrograde, and I would say it's really important to like really double check things if you have a natal Mercury retrograde, because things can kind of like slip through the cracks as well too when it comes to, you know, writing or expression or education, themes like that. Absolutely. I wrote, for example, I'm just talking from personal experience because I think it helps you guys like understand more, but I wrote my first poetry book like 5 years ago. And when I wrote that book at the time, first of all, it took me so long to write it and edit it because of my natal Mercury retrograde. But another thing is I look back a lot at that book and I can see all the places where I could have done something better. I could have edited it a little better. I could have revived it a lot more. So it's not that it's bad. Like I still really love that book. It's my soul is in my first poetry book. But I look back at it now and I'm like, ooh, like I could have edited that or I could have done this differently. There can be an energy of needing to really look at something more than once and check it and double check and review and revise, essentially, because that's the energy of retrograde, right? If we look at the word it's like review, revise, redo. That really connects to retrograde planets in the chart. So that's a really big theme I see as well too. Now, another huge theme I see with Mercury retrograde natally in the chart is very like non-conventional and unique ways of viewing things, unique ways of expression. Really, the mind can be very unique and different in a lot of ways. So someone with a Mercury retrograde can have really interesting, like out-of-the-box ideas, out-of-the-box thoughts, can be a very creative placement. And actually, you know, a lot of really famous writers throughout history have had natal Mercury retrograde. And I think the reason for it is because if you want to be good at writing or expression, you have to be thinking a little bit off the path to come up with something that's like different and innovative. So if someone has a natal Mercury retrograde, they can think of this really amazing book idea and it can become really famous and really successful, because it's just like something that hasn't been done before. It's non-conventional. They can have really great ideas. And also I think why Mercury retrograde can create a lot of really well-known authors is because it's such like an introspective placement with Mercury retrograde. There's such a need to like sit and reflect and think again and think some more. That, you know, to be a good writer, you have to really be able to like sit in silence and just like really focus and hone in on something, right? So Mercury retrograde natives are really good when it comes to just like sitting and focusing and using their introspective ability to really think and like, oh my God, this idea is coming to me now. I'm in silence and all the noise isn't there, right? It can really be that way with Mercury retrograde, very introspective. So, you know, writers have to like basically sit and just like focus on what they're writing for weeks and months and years. You know, some writers, it takes them like so many years to finish their books, and it's a lot of sitting and reflecting and reviewing and revising and introspection, right? And that's Mercury retrograde, right? It creates this energy where someone does want to do that. They want to introspect, they want to reflect, they want to think about something over and over again. And that really lends itself to writing, right? Like you're not going to be a successful writer if you can't sit still and you have to always be out about in the world and you can't introspect. It's really important for, having that writing talent. So you will see some really, really successful, talented writers throughout history had a natal Mercury retrograde. Absolutely. So it can create really talented writers. It can create really successful writers, and usually, again, we don't want to speak in absolutes, but usually with a Mercury retrograde, there's a really deep desire to be more introspective and really sit with things and view it from like a different perspective, right? I think people with natal Mercury retrograde can have really unique thought forms. They can think very differently. They can think outside the box, very creative, very unique in the mercurial sort of energy as well too. So it can make really talented writers, teachers, authors, people who do express themselves. There's just something different and a little bit non-conventional, more introspective about it, and they might need a lot of time to process what they want to say. But when that processing happens, it's like, okay, but they said something really good. They said something really powerful or something really important, but it takes longer to get there, right? It's not just going to be like, blah, 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 it's all coming out and it's flowing and oh my God, I'm saying all these things. There's going to be some need to reflect and sit before the expression happens. So that's really important. And I would say as well too, Mercury retrograde can give a lot of shyness in the upbringing or the early childhood, especially in like schooling and education when someone is younger. More so, I see it when they're younger. They usually grow out of it and get a lot more confident as they get older. But I feel like the first half of life, if you have a natal Mercury retrograde, you're pretty shy. You're pretty in your own sort of like thoughts a lot. You can feel very introspective. A lot of that energy. And you can have some like shyness or distaste for like being in huge groups, huge crowds. I see that a lot with natal Mercury retrograde as well too. And again, this is more so like first half of life. I think a lot of people with that Mercury retrograde outgrow it and become a lot more confident and self-assured as they get older. That's been my experience for sure. So much of my life now is constantly communicating. I talk to clients all the time. I'm always on the phone. I'm always making content. I'm always writing. Like, I'm always doing things that are connected to Mercury, but it really developed for me later on in life, which is, again, the energy of retrograde comes later, develops a little bit later. Mercury retrograde natives can actually be really great with communication. It's just different in the way that it happens, right? It takes longer. It's more introspective. It's more internal. It develops as someone gets older and they get more confidence within their speech and expression as they get older as well too. I see that a lot with Mercury retrograde. It's like ripening into oneself in the second half of life, or just like late 20s going into the early 30s is when you can see a retrograde planet or the ruler of a house start to develop, right? So someone can be like in their early 20s and struggle with Mercury. They're like not sure how to express themselves. They're not doing great with school, or education's kind of confusing. And then they come into their late 20s, going into their early 30s, and that Mercury starts to really develop a lot better. So you'll see that a lot with Mercury retrograde as well too. I would say a big aspect of Mercury retrograde is when you're younger, especially, you can feel like something just feels slower about the processing, right? So other people might grasp things or understand things really quickly, and it just like comes to them and they get it and it's right away and it's immediate. If you have a natal Mercury retrograde, you're going to have to be comfortable and learn to accept the fact that things just take more time for you to process. They might take more time for you to understand. You might have to get like a tutor or like really, really have someone help you understand certain concepts. I see that a lot with natal Mercury retrograde as well too. There's just like this slower processing that happens there, right? Because Mercury is all about the processing aspect. So when it's retrograde, it's slower, it's different, it takes longer to develop, and yeah, it can feel kind of weird when you're younger, but as you get older, I think a lot of people learn to work with it and understand it a lot better. So when you're younger, it might seem like you're not grasping certain concepts, or things don't click as easily, and you might have to learn things like multiple times. And another thing is when you do something multiple times, you can actually become really, really good at something, right? So like if you have a natal Mercury retrograde, you take a class once, the concepts aren't making sense, you take it again, and then you take it again, and then you're like, oh my God, I actually understand this so well, and I can be really, really good at this. Like, it's more so like that as opposed to just immediately understanding something. It takes a little bit longer, and you might have to do more of like a deep dive or really dedicate yourself to learn something with natal Mercury retrograde as well too. And again, I just feel like a natal Mercury retrograde gives really eccentric thinkers, it gives really creative minds, people who have very out of the box sort of ideas. There's something different, there's something eccentric, there's something unique about a natal Mercury retrograde, right? And that's really awesome. Like, I love people with natal Mercury retrograde. I feel like I feel like most people I connect with happen to have a Mercury retrograde for whatever reason. I'm like, wait, I know so many of my friends, so many people I've dated have had natal Mercury retrograde. So it's really interesting because there might be some sense of like, if one person has natal Mercury retrograde and the other does, you might just get each other more. That could be something that exists, absolutely. But yeah, it creates people that are very unique in their thoughts and very creative, very, very creative aspect. So many writers have natal Mercury retrograde, and it can be very profound sort of thoughts as well too. I would also say if you have natal Mercury retrograde, don't force yourself to come to conclusions too quickly, because if you do, you might regret it or might feel like you come to the wrong decision or conclusion. Like, I find with natal Mercury retrograde, we really have to sit with something and really ponder, like, is this the right thing? Is this what I want to do? Is this the right decision? We don't always do best with like rash, quick decisions. There is a need to really sit and reflect before taking action with natal Mercury retrograde. So don't let people like rush you into making a decision. Don't let people try to force your internal compass, because what I find with Mercury retrograde, there's like a strong internal feeling of like, I know what I need to do, but people might try to like rush that, and you're like, no, I need to like sit with this longer, or I need to really think about this, or I need to reflect on this, right? So it's really important with natal Mercury retrograde to take your time with decision making, with figuring out, is this the right thing for me? Is this the right path? There's such an introspective, reflective, quiet quality about a natal Mercury retrograde, and that's really, really important. And that's actually, for me at least, when I've made my best decisions, is when I've like really sat with something and like, pondered it and like, is this the right thing? Am I meant to do this? That's when I come to really clear, powerful decisions. Whenever I try to rush something or I do something too impulsively, I always look back and I'm like, that was not the right decision. Or if someone like tries to like rush me into a decision, I always look back and I'm like, I should have sat with it more. I should have followed my own internal compass, right? So Mercury retrograde is very introspective, and I think there is a power in like really reflecting on your choices and decisions, what you want to say, how you want to say it, how you want to express yourself before you get there. And because it's retrograde, so it's different than like the normal mercurial energy, other people may not understand that or get that, but you have to like know that about yourself. Like, no, I actually need to just like trust my internal feeling about this. I need to take my time. I need to be more patient with this. I'm not going to rush into some decision with a natal Mercury retrograde as well too. All right, and let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about my experience with natal Mercury retrograde. I would say, when a planet's retrograde, the thing about it is it can absolutely be a theme in your life, but it's more of this, like, the best way I could explain a retrograde planet, it's like this dormant sort of energy, right? So you might think a lot about Mercury. If your Mercury is retrograde, you think a lot about schooling, you think a lot about learning, you think a lot about communication, business, writing, teaching, expression, travel, etc., but you might not always act on it or do it until you start getting older and start really understanding the energy of that planet, right? So let's say someone has Saturn retrograde, which I also have Saturn retrograde as well too. You can think a lot about Saturn. You can think a lot about discipline and structure and duty and responsibility, but until you get older, you might not fully like understand that Saturnian energy or act on it. And then when it does come online, it can like really come online. Like that can be the energy of a retrograde planet, right? So like Mercury's retrograde, you might think a lot about writing, think a lot about expression, think a lot about communication, teaching, business, etc. And then one day you're like in your late 20s, going into your early 30s, and then you start to really activate that mercurial energy, and it's like, oh my God, I want to do this all the time. Or like Saturn's retrograde, you can think a lot about duty and discipline and structure, and then it's not really online for a while, and then it does come online, and it's like all you can think about. So retrograde planets can be that way, absolutely, where it's like dormant energy, right? It's almost like something you have to activate in your chart. You can't just like sit around and think it's going to happen with a retrograde planet, or when the rulers of a house are retrograde, you have to go activate it, you have to make it happen, right? So if you have Mercury retrograde and you really want to write a book, you have to like sit with that. You have to make that happen. You have to really, really put yourself in the space to do it. And the retrograde energy is going to want to be more passive and like reflect and think, but you have to get yourself out of that and just start doing it. You know, if the ruler of someone's 5th house is retrograde and they want to have children, they have to like go out and make that happen, right? They have to like find the right person, you know, do the thing, right? So it just means that it's more passive and it's more dormant. But then once you activate it, it can be like, oh my God, I actually love this thing so much. Or, oh my God, this is like totally what I'm meant to do. It's just dormant until activated, which another example again is like when I analyzed Diane Keaton's chart, and her 5th ruler is retrograde, and she had kids in like her, I forget how old she was it her 40s or 50s? I don't know, but she had kids much later on in life, and she went out and adopted them, so she had to like go make it happen. It's not just gonna come to you when something is retrograde, all right? You have to really work on it, you have to activate it. But until you activate it, it's always gonna be there. It's always like a thought form. It's dormant. For example, I have Mercury retrograde. My whole life, I always wanted to write, and I always wanted to write books, and I loved like teaching, and I loved expression and communication and social media. But I had to like really activate that and make it happen, right? It wasn't just going to come to me with Mercury retrograde. So yeah, that's been a lot of my experience with natal Mercury retrograde. And what I see a lot in clients' charts as well too, I tend to attract a lot of clients with natal Mercury retrograde for whatever reason. And one big takeaway I give to them is really sit with and maybe write down what you want to express before you express it, because you might find that a lot of the times the things you want to say, the expression you are trying to communicate, it can get very lost in translation, or it can just not quite come out in the right ways. That's like a theme I really, really see with natal Mercury retrograde. So sit, reflect, ponder before speaking things out. And it's not one of those kind of lifetimes. If you have Mercury retrograde, you're not here to just talk off the handle and not ponder what you're saying and just say a bunch of useless stuff. And you have to really like sit with it and think and reflect and try to get it out in the right ways, even though it can be difficult sometimes with Mercury retrograde. All right, so let me know if you guys have natal Mercury retrograde. I'm sure a lot of you do. It's a really popular placement in astrology, and again, I think it makes really creative minds, so many like artists and writers and really creative people have had Mercury retrograde. It just takes longer to learn how to work with it and activate it. And you have to really understand that there's such like an introspective quality about Mercury for you, right? The way you think and the way you express yourself and the way you talk, it's going to be more introspective, and there's going to be a need for you to like sit with and reflect a lot before you just get out there and start speaking and doing all the things as well too. All right, and then of course we have to also look at Mercury rules what houses, then those houses get a retrograde effect on them, right? So that's going to be very specific for everyone's charts, but that's like a huge aspect of the retrograde energy is the houses it rules take on a more retrograde effect onto those houses. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below if you guys have the natal Mercury retrograde and what your experience has been, if you relate with these things. And also, I would love to hear your experience of having a natal Mercury retrograde, sprinkling your experience down below as well too. And if you guys want me to analyze your own personal chart, I'm always open for readings, and that will be booked in the description as well. I hope you guys are having such a good end of the year, and I have so many just like really fun ideas for going into 2026 with content and YouTube and TikTok, and I feel really good. I feel really inspired. I'm having my Saturn return in my 10th house of career, so it's a really big sort of pivotal time for me career-wise, where there's just so much I want to do this next year. There's so much I feel really excited about in business and life and creativity. So yeah, I'm feeling good and excited to put out so much more content coming soon as well too. If you guys have any suggestions, also leave that down below. All right, so we will talk soon, and I'm sending you all the love. Bye, guys.